Hey, what's up, guys? My name is June Hlungwane, and on this channel, we talk politics and current affairs from time to time. So, Penuel the Pen has raised a very important question, in my opinion, and that is basically pointing to one of the reasons why there is contention. One of the root causes why there's contention in politics. Of course, this is one of the reasons. There are other reasons. For example, there's wars, religion, and all these other aspects that do also create contention in politics. But the way in which people and business are viewed in politics is a huge contention, in my opinion. It is precisely why politics exists or is viewed in a spectrum or exists in a spectrum between left, center, and right.
If you think this country belongs to you because you've got an ID and because you put a cross on a piece of paper and you happen to earn crumbs, every month you collect 370 grant and your child collects 500 and whatever it is today, child grant, and your child gets taught to be a servant in a free school, and you get to be injected with all types of pharmaceutical bullshit in a free clinic, you think that should make you a patriot and fight against foreigners and fight for this country and bleed? Or you have a nice job. You're that slave with the gold chains. You're like, nah, I know we're slaves, but I get to sleep in the house, and I know your chains are made of copper. Nigga, I got gold chains, homie. My chains are made of gold. Still a chain, homie. You're swimming in debt. You're one salary away from your house being repossessed. One salary away from your car being repossessed. One salary away from your children being kicked out of their private school. Your medical aid being cancelled. Your fancy little life being taken away from you. You are a slave to the same system. And Rupert doesn't care about medical aid. He owns Mediclinic. Adrian Gore doesn't care about medical aid. He owns Discovery. These guys can go anywhere they want and do whatever they want. These are the people that actually are the real players in this country. The rest of us are just, like I said, tenants and residents in a complex that is not even our own. That's very important for as many people as possible to understand, so that you can start moving in the right direction. And more importantly, so that you can have peace. So many people get worked up listening to politicians argue and bicker. And we get on social media and we dispute and debate and argue with each other and we swear at each other and there's racism. At the end of the day, this country does not belong to us. It belongs to big business. And the government, it's just a governance system. It's security guards on behalf of big business. And their other job as security guards is to run a little charity foundation on the side, an orphanage, what we call social welfare, for the poorest majority. Here's a free grant, here's free schooling, here's free healthcare, here's a free little house, so that you don't make too much noise. Because it's cheaper to give you this than to give you a decent job. It's cheaper to give you this than to give you access to real land and real skills. It's cheaper to give you this as an insurance for the rich than for you to actually be a real participant in the economy. I wish more and more of us could take on the mindset of amazamazama, take on the mindset of small-scale farmers, take on the mindset of small-scale artisans that build things, that can fix things, that can put up a little house. That's fundamentally important. South Africa does not belong to the people. It belongs to big business.
So my commentary is not necessarily disagreeing with what Penuel is saying, but I just want to introduce a different perspective, right? And number one, it would be to say that a country is not just about people or where it is geographically located, west, east, south. It's not just about that. A country is defined or recognized by what it's able to offer, right? How it's able to cultivate its minerals, how it's able to cultivate an industry, a tourism industry, using all of the beautiful landscapes and the scenic views to be able to create a tourism industry, make money through trading, through its minerals, and to be able to feed into other things like infrastructure, like technology, like building roads, and. But for this to exist or for this to become a thing, that is enabled through business. And one perfect example of this point would be, look at struggling countries. There's a lot for you to kind of get the reference here. Struggling countries, they have people, but because they are not able to offer all of these other things, people eventually leave those countries and go to other countries, for example, that are able to offer this. We see this happening a lot in African countries. People are packing up, taking their entire families, and basically starting a whole new life in a whole other continent because of the lack of value that their country of origin isn't able to offer them. So in my mind, I kind of see all of these areas, in some sort of a hierarchy, right? Which is to say, you have country, or the country, which kind of becomes the canvas. You've got the people, which is where Penuel is sort of coming in quite strongly from. You've got government, which becomes the tool, right? That intertwines and makes everything work together. Then you've got business, which becomes what feeds all of these things. So all of these things are working together. They are all linked. You cannot have one without the other, in my mind. And to further drive this hierarchy that I tend to lean towards whenever these kind of topics come in, is to say you have the country, which is basically the canvas. Country, house, or hosts people. People live in a country. Then people elect a government, right? Which means the people become the government's biggest stakeholder. Government has one responsibility, which is to be able to cater for the needs of people. They become basically the vehicle, the tool to be able to cater for the needs of people. What are the needs of people? One of the biggest ones is the fact that we cannot simply escape the natural order of life, which means when we get to a certain age, first we are born into the care of our parents, our mother, they take care of us. Then we get to an age where we want to stand on our own 2 feet, where we want to be able to make our own decisions, go buy our own house, go do our own things. We become adults, right? And then when that transition happens, what then enables us to stand on our own 2 feet, to do this and that, is financial muscle. You need financial muscle, which is where business comes in, right? Which is why business is so important, because that very critical transition from you moving in from being a child to being an adult, money then becomes an enabler of all of these things. So just like you have this dependency between people and government, like I mentioned, people elect government. Government cannot exist without people. The very same thing applies with people and business. You cannot separate the two. Like this famous Business 101 rule says that business exists to solve the problems that people have. You have a dependency. That relationship cannot be separated. People need to eat. That's why you've got farmers. People need to move from point A to B. That's why you've got services like Uber. People have kids one day. They want to take their children to schools that provide better quality education and. That's why you've got the likes of Kuro. And this dependency between people and business has basically come with just the natural progression of life and the times that we live in. If you think about back in the 90s, well, before I was born in 1993, in the 80s somewhere, whenever, we did not have smartphones, right? The times then were different in how people were able to communicate. But with the need for people to communicate, then came the progression, came the invention and innovation and all of these other things. So that is always going to happen. We are always going to progress and move forward. Things are not going to stay the same. And as a result, the need between people and business grows. The more we need more things. For now, at the moment, when I look at the markets and sort of where people are shifting towards, there's a lot of demand for convenience. People don't want to stand in queues for too long. People don't want to be stressed at the mall, blah, blah, blah. There is someone answering or delivering for that particular problem. So business is there to solve the problem that people have, so you cannot separate the two. So in my mind, the sooner that we can all understand, right, why all of these entities are linked and why it's important that all of them work hand in hand, country, people, government, business, we cannot separate these things. They are interlinked. The sooner we can understand this, is the sooner we can get to the other really important needs of society, in my opinion, which is then how we're now talking values. We're talking good values. Which are good values? Which are bad values? We're talking the role of family. It's important that families stay together because that is the nucleus of every a successful society. It is a good sort of springboard for children to be raised in good and stable families. We can get to all these other things like building high trust societies, instilling discipline amongst our children. And in turn, this will also help us as a society to be able to acquire better skills, to just be better providers, to be more productive. Because when we have sort of the foundation right? Which is really the intangible things that money cannot buy. You cannot buy safety. You cannot buy the sense of feeling like you belong, the sense of having a good family structure. Those are things that are just invaluable, right? When you have all of these things, right, you are more productive, you are more present, you are just a better person in general. In a society, you can be able to acquire skills. And when you strengthen your skills and you have more higher skills and an end, you can then take that to business and say, hey, I am able to offer A, B, C, D. I'm more than just someone who does this. I can do much more, therefore pay me more money, right? So in my opinion, it's important that we just get the cycle moving, and we cannot separate country from people, from government, from business. All of these things live together. And while we are talking about business, I just want to touch on another sort of sentiment that I tend to see a lot, particularly from our media peeps. It's something that I tend to see a lot. It's there, it exists. There's a bit of a negative sentiment on the idea of markets and politics. Or what you would hear a lot is that markets dictating to our politicians how things must be done and which direction must be taken. The truth of the matter is, this is definitely happening, right? This is definitely happening. And there's very little anything anyone can do about, particularly when you're on Twitter and all of that. You cannot do anything about that fact. It's happening. But I think it's important to always view this from another lens, which is to say, it is not always sinister when business or the markets or whatever gets involved in politics or gets in touch with politicians ahead of elections and an end. It's not always sinister. The notion, right, or what really makes it difficult for business, right, to be sinister is that most businesses are driven by profit, right? Most businesses are in it for the long run. No one is going to invest 50 billion into a country just to be called into court tomorrow because they were corrupt. It's stupid. And I know there are people that do that, of course, but it's important to realize that it's not always sinister, right? Most businesses are in it for the long run. So breaking rules, not following the laws of that country, not paying tax or whatever the requirements is basically short-term gain for long-term pain. And that is not the mindset of how most businesses work. So any involvement with markets into politics is not always to be seen as though it is sinister or evil. So when a business chooses to invest in a country, let's say it's a foreign investor coming into South Africa or wherever to invest X amount of money. Number one, that immediately puts that business owner into a whole other rank in a society compared to you and I, for example. And the reasons for this are very simple in my view. That is because when that person invests, let's say 50 billion into building a factory at a town in Limpopo, for example, right? This factory it's not just the factory as a standalone. That person is going to hire people who are going to work at the factory. Those people are going to be paid a salary. They take that money, they're able to then go and shop and buy a kettle, for example. They then be able to take that money and go shop to buy shoes. Take that money to be able to support a local salon. So just from one factory alone, you are able to then cultivate different markets, different opportunities. There's a whole other boom. You see this happening a lot. For example, there'll be a factory that is put in. We don't see this a lot of late for obvious reasons. 3 letters, A and C. But when there was this happening a lot, like I've mentioned this in previous videos, that I come from a small town, Escort in KwaZulu-Natal. And when you saw, for example, a boom in some of the factories that were operating there, suddenly now there were new transport systems. The schools now are taking in more people. There is now a need to have a mall and so forth. So it's just impossible that business owners coming into a country or into a new town, investing or expanding their business, are not going to have an interest in how the country is run or how things work. So any sort of like left curve or any sort of change in politics that has a direct impact in their investment, like I said, most businesses are in it for the long run, is something that they're going to have a lot of say, not a lot of say, but it's in their interest to care about how things work in a society. But of course, we know that there's things like parliament, businesses they don't get involved to an extent of bribing people to make decisions in parliament. That's why in the case of democracies, the parliament process is contentious. There's debate, especially with the sort of entry of coalition government in South Africa. It wouldn't be that simple for a business owner to just pay members of parliament and say, hey, do this. There will still be debate at that level, but it goes without saying that it is in the interest of the business for a country to succeed. It is in the interest of the business to be able to, or at least it's in the interest of the business that government takes into consideration what the business needs. It's not necessarily to say business dictates, but government has to think about business whenever they make their choices. They cannot just think about themselves. And I think to conclude, it's important that you ask yourself this question, and that is, how is the politics that you're supporting, the leaders that you're supporting, how are they enabling the concept of markets, whether it's mainstream markets, small niche markets, informal markets like the one that Penuel The Pen is speaking about? How are they enabling this? Because we need to then be able to move away from political leaders who come in and tell us that they are just for people. You cannot just say you are for people. That is a major red flag. Instead, you should say that you are for a country, because at least then, if you think about the points that I raised earlier, the country needs people, needs government, needs business. It's a better selling point to say you want to see a country succeed as opposed to saying you want to see people succeed, because then you have all of these things whereby you picking this group over that group. And I think also another thing we need to think about in South Africa is that the majority of the people in this country just so happen to be one race. So it is very, very, very opportunistic for people to come in and just speak to this one particular race group, because it is more than that. Even that race group needs markets. We need business. We need all of these other things. So it's a major red flag. That's all I have for you guys for this video. Please feel free to let me know what you think of what I just raised. Do you agree with Penuel? Do you agree with some of the points that I've raised? I hope I was able to enlighten you, because the main thing was just to bring a different perspective to this argument of people versus business in our politics, because I think there is no separating people from business. We need business. Business needs people. But yeah, let me know your thoughts in the comment section. And before you go, please hit subscribe, and also please click like to boost this video. Until next time.